thank you guys for coming. So my name is Cari Olson, guys. I'm not a politician. I'm not running for a seat. I'm just an angry, very upset citizen. I found out about this because I went to my daughter's volleyball game and they bought out the concessions. And me and my husband are like, that doesn't sound right. What is this? So I stole some napkins and I walked out and I started my research. And then I started calling the experts. What is this? I had no idea AI data centers existed. I am catching up to this as like all of you guys are. And here's the thing, there's no such thing as AI data center experts. We're all guessing. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna show you what this is, right? They're gonna draw you a picture from everything, from the water to the energy to the land. We're going to tell you exactly what they're gonna do here and what they're doing with this state, okay? Every single person on this panel is an expert in one way or the other, okay? So I'm gonna start off with Molly Bell. She is the political director for Montana Conservation Voters. She has a long history of being a huge advocate for Montanans, all throughout Montanans. She's always up in the session. She's a face that I've known since what, 2010? 2010. So I'm gonna kick it off to her. If you guys wanna go have a beer, go have some dinner, it's right next door. Thanks, everybody.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Molly Bell. Thanks for that introduction, Cari. Appreciate you pulling this together. I'm going to be moderating the panel tonight. As Cari mentioned, I am the political director for Montana Conservation Voters, and I live in Billings. So I'm going to get to introductions here in a minute, but just to kind of give you a lay of the presentation, as well as talk about some housekeeping items first here. So with the rise of artificial intelligence, tech companies are quickly working to build data centers across the country, including here in Broadview.
Louder.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Loud.
I'll try to project.
Use your own voice.
All right. Tonight we're going to pause and talk about the potential costs of data center development to the environment, Montana communities, and electricity ratepayers. During this nonpartisan informational event, we will explore recent changing energy policy at the state and federal level and updates on Northwestern energy and data center proposals that could raise electricity bills and impact water resources. We will dive deeper into data center development here in Yellowstone County, and I've had assurances from all of our panel members that they have not used ChatGPT to construct their presentations. Before we get started though, a few housekeeping items. Please remember to silence your cell phones so that we don't have any disruptions to the presentation. We're also going to be having a Q&A after the panel, and you should have some note cards that have been passed around where you can write your questions for the panelists on the note cards, and we will try our best to get all of the questions answered. If we can't get all of the questions answered in the time allowed, come see us after the presentation, or we'll take down your information. We'll do the best we can to answer your questions. There's also a sign-in sheet there at the table that is a sign-in for all of the groups that are represented here tonight. And so by signing that, you're signing on to getting emails from us to update you about what is happening with the advocacy or the data center the advocacy that we're all doing. So the partners here tonight are Montana Conservation Voters. We also have Central Montana Resource Council, and then we have Montana Environmental Information Center. And I would like to introduce our first panelist, if she is ready. Our first panelist, if he is ready. So first we're going to hear from Mike McDearmon with the Central Montana Resource Council. Mike is a designer and researcher who works with new technologies like AI and machine learning, helping making sure that they're used in practical and responsible ways. He lives in Lewistown and has spent over a decade building software for fields ranging from civil engineering to shipping and large computer systems. Mike cares about understanding what new tools can really do while making sure they're used thoughtfully, governed well, and don't come at the expense of the land and communities that they depend on.
Okay, thank you so much to MEIC for hosting this event and for providing the opportunity to meet folks here. And thank you so much to all the folks that showed up. This is amazing. As Molly mentioned, I live in Lewistown. My name is Mike, and I'm a volunteer with Central Montana Resource Council. I also work in software, so there's at least one person that works in software that lives in Lewistown. And I've spent now almost 15 years designing and building tools for a broad range of industries, like Molly said, from civil engineering to healthcare and small, large companies, everything in between. I've also worked on tech infrastructure, projects for companies like VMware building software that manages computers inside data centers, a little bit like this one here, Atlas Data Center in Butte. And it dawned on me recently that I've never once personally been inside a data center, despite having worked on software that's connected to how a lot of them operate. And that might give you a little bit of perspective on the number of cars that you see in the parking lot here or don't. This is a Google satellite image from Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. And it's not surprising to me that there's maybe 3 cars in the parking lot, because the vast majority of operations that happen in a data center can be done remotely. Once these computers are hooked up and networked, the vast majority of what you do in a data center is not what happens in the building, but outside the building. So what I'm going to talk about to kick us off is a little bit about data centers themselves, how connected their size and resource needs are with new technologies like AI, and how what we're seeing today is unique even by tech industry standards. And that's really why I'm here today. I've spent enough time in this industry to see a lot of change happen in the last 15 years, and this particular moment to me feels pretty different. The opportunities are pretty huge on one hand, but so are the risks. And this moment that we're seeing right now is the world where software is actually colliding with physical resources like energy and water. So I believe that having conversations like we are today, talking about it, helps everybody chart a better path forward. A little bit about data centers, Data Center 101, if you will. They are not new. They go back as long as computers have. The image on the left is ENIAC. It's one of the first computers ever built, and you'll note that it looks more like a data center than a computer. First computers were the size of buildings until they get smaller and smaller and smaller, and now we carry around cell phones that are computers more powerful than ENIAC was or claims to be. The difference, though, really started to happen in the 80s and 90s when the internet came about. Then all of a sudden you need all these computers in a centralized space to serve up everything from sending emails, processing transactions, hosting websites. Everybody needed a computer somewhere else to make our little mini computers operate with all these interconnected services. So simply put, they're boxes, they're buildings filled with lots of computers. You can think of them as a big box building filled with hallways of server racks doing all these things. And as such, they have become a central part of the internet and computer infrastructure. There's no getting around them existing. And like I said, they've been around as long as computers have. Next slide, please. What's different, though, is AI, and specifically large language models, or LLMs. These have become kind of synonymous with AI, but it's really not the same thing. Large language models are a subset of this bigger thing happening called AI. But large language models require orders of magnitude more compute resources than a lot of the technologies that came before. And the reason is because they are large. From my perspective, to call them large language models is really an understatement. They are massive. There's so much data involved for just training ChatGPT's 4th version, which was released in March 2023, so much data that it would take a brand new iPad over 1,000 years to train that model. Obviously, no tech company, they're all famous for moving fast and breaking things, is going to wait nearly that long to make a model. So to speed it up, down to weeks or months, that training process, you need many, many computers running in one small space. You also need specialized hardware. All these things called GPUs and TPUs you might be hearing about are high performance machines that are used to train these models very quickly. You also need lots of storage, and you need to cram it all, like I said, into a very small space where you can train a model in the same building. That therefore requires a lot of electricity, water, and a huge amount of money to do this. There are only a few companies in the world that have the capital to do this. Next slide, please. So still, you might also be asking after that, why is AI so different? And why are we seeing so much investment in it when it costs so much to do it? I talked a little bit about how it's in the definition. Large language model requires lots of computers to make this stuff work. Adding fuel to that, though, is that we're using a very brute force approach to make the next generation of model smarter, which is counterintuitive a little bit. So you saw in the last slide, or a couple slides ago, how the first computers ever were room-sized things. And now we all carry around these little cell phone-sized things. So we're kind of trained to imagine that as technology gets better, it gets smaller and it gets more efficient. And what we're seeing with large language models is the opposite. As a model gets smarter, it needs more and more and more to outperform its last successor model. And this has worked over the last few years for tech giants that are making these models, but it's also resorted to staggering resource demand. So now companies like ChatGPT are faced with a future where you have ChatGPT version 5, you're in the middle of making version 6, and version 6 needs exponentially more resources to outperform version 5 because of this process. So, given that, why all the buzz? The fact to me is that whether you love these models or you hate what they do a lot. And they do a lot more than just like a lot of commercials where they generate, silly memes and haikus and stuff like that. The business potential is massive, and that includes the automation of many things and jobs like mine that were previously thought not automatable, like software development. National security has also become an emerging theme, and that's driving massive federal government spend in these technologies. I should say the last image, by the way, is indicative of this story that you're seeing here. That was a tool called Cursor. That is a tool that software developers use to write new applications. About 2 years ago, the idea of that application is so much better.
Woo, thank you, Rory.
So that last image you saw of AI writing code. Tech itself is kind of a test bed for a lot of these new technologies. And what's kind of wild to me is seeing how much tech itself is changing right now. Indicative of this is right now, you have a world where in less than 3 years, writing software has gone from writing the code yourself, which you can kind of see if those squiggly lines up in the top left is what a software developer looks at every day when they're writing code, to a world now that's more like the bottom right, where a single software engineer is actually not writing code at all. They're directing teams of AI agents to write the code for them. You can imagine how much this is upending just the process of writing and developing new applications when the technologies that we use to make it are changing beneath our feet very, very quickly. Additionally, if you're in tech, startup capital for new companies is pretty much frozen if you're not doing anything that's not AI. So industry scale concentration on one technology, even if it's one as groundbreaking and revolutionary as AI, it really inflates the bubble risk, and it creates a landscape where companies are all working on solving the same problem and developing technologies around the same set of problems. And I hear this in customer calls when I'm talking to people about the products that I work on. They're all thinking about the same things, and I've got some quotes here about to that effect. We're looking for new agentic AI capabilities, and how is your product agentic, and how is it different or better than ChatGPT? It's all anyone can really think about at the moment. And you can kind of see this on, this is an example from Y Combinator, which is a startup incubator in Silicon Valley. You just look at this list, and all of these companies are AI direct or AI adjacent related technologies. Like I said, it's very hard to do work on anything that's not AI right now here in tech. Next slide, please. So from a little bit of perspective, I want to talk about the money involved here. So if you had close to $2 billion to spend in 2023, one way that you could spend that money was on the world's largest cruise ship. This is big gray rectangular box. If you had $100 million, you could make ChatGPT version 4. That consumes 50 gigawatt hours of energy, which is enough to power San Francisco for 3 days. That was in March 2023. Next slide. If you took, by June 2025, there were at least 30 frontier models that existed from 12 AI developers. So a frontier model is basically, you can think of it as a cutting edge model. There were 30 of them that existed by June 2025 from 12 different major AI developers. So if you took our $100 million box and you multiplied it by 9, of course that's $90 million, but that is a gross understatement to what these models actually cost. Go to the next slide, please. That's because, like I said before, training new AI models is getting more expensive and larger. So to put that in perspective, this model, Grok 4, which is part of XAI, which is owned by Elon Musk. You didn't think that he was in the AI game, he is. He is a very major player right now. Grok 4 cost $500 million to train, was released in July 2025, and that took 310 gigawatts of electricity, which is enough to power San Francisco for 2 weeks. Next slide, please. So what this means is that bigger models, this push from AI, means bigger data centers. And you get terms like hyperscaler and gigafactory now entering the picture. So a hyperscaler is defined as any data center that's at least 10,000 square feet with 5,000 servers. And what we're seeing now with AI data centers makes those look really puny. This proposed data center was the TAC data center in Great Falls, and that was going to come in at 2 million square feet. And if that came online, it would have consumed as much power as about 85% of the state of Montana in its entirety. Next slide, please. So the perspective here, I want to kind of just share some of the words of tech insiders, some of them anyway. And you really kind of see this language of a win at all costs race right now that's made even faster when you consider the fact that tech historically has been almost unregulated. And because of that and the amount of capital that these companies have, they're able to move extremely fast. So this is a tweet from Elon Musk on his platform X about a little less than 2 weeks ago, kind of welcoming the Colossus 2 supercomputer, which is now operational. He's touting it as the first gigawatt training cluster in the world, and it upgrades, his words, to 1.5 gigawatts in April, which is an extreme amount of energy in a very short amount of time.
Where is it?
This is in, I think it's Mississippi, but don't quote me on that. Somewhere in the south.
The first Colossus was in Memphis.
Yeah.
But, sure.
But echoing this, and I wanted to share this tweet too because Elon mentioned it in the same announcement. You really kind of see some of the sort of the boomerism of the boosterism, I should say, of what's happening by some tech insiders. So here, I just want to again speak their own words here, right? Like XAI has officially become the first to bring a gigawatt scale coherent AI training cluster online. While competitors are still drafting roadmaps for 2027, XAI is already operating at major city level power today. Again, all this is possible. Execution speed is unreal. Colossus 1 from dirt to fully operational in 122 days. Colossus 2 just crossed the 1 gigawatt barrier, charting 2 gigawatts total. The playbook hasn't changed. Move faster than everyone. Scale before they finish meetings. The strategy is clear. Speed and execution at scale. So I'm left wondering, how much do they care about small towns? Next slide. The good news is that there are better ways forward, and there's a lot actually happening in the research space around AI. It does not have to be gigantic mega models. These are just 4 examples that are not exhaustive. There's many, many more things happening here. One example, which is the space that I work in right now, is smaller purpose-built AI models, or SLMs. These can often outperform larger models at a fraction of the cost of compute. There's also more efficient large models like DeepSeek V3, and if you see the relative size of this little box, it was trained and released after GPT-4, and it was less than a tenth of the cost of compute. And it meets or exceeds GPT-4 on a lot of benchmarks, so it can be done. It is, it's a change. Photonic chips, or OPUs, are also using light instead of electricity to transfer data. If you use light instead of electricity, your electricity costs go way down. I want to see more investment in that type of technology. And then finally, there's policy that protects communities and pushes tech giants to think about these things faster than simply bigger, faster, more power. So I want to end with just closing on saying that if there's anything that tech has taught me, it's that what we're seeing right now we should expect more of it. There's more AI upheavals and tech, disruptions that are going to come. That's how this industry works. And that a lot of these things actually have the potential to transform the energy landscape in a positive way. And I want to see more of that happen. I'm left wondering too, what will it mean for gigafactories being built for the outsized needs of AI today when it's bound to become more efficient or at least change less than a year from now? Thank you.
Next, we have Ann Hedges. She's going to talk a little bit about the impacts on electricity ratepayers as well as the regulatory environment with data centers. Ann is MEIC's executive director, and she began work at MEIC in 1993 and has worked towards a clean and healthful environment for present and future generations ever since. Her focus on air pollution, climate, energy, and the public's right to know and participate has resulted in numerous campaign and legislative victories that have protected public health and natural resources for generations to come.
I'm the eighth of 9 kids and I rarely need a microphone. But I'll do it anyway. So I just want to talk a little bit about energy and data centers and energy. But we need to start with the baseline. Where are we at now? And so I just want to talk first, I think you heard enough about this, which is energy demand for data centers is growing faster in the West than we are going to be able to supply. That is a truism. Next slide. And what we already know is how much our energy bills have been increasing. So this is Northwestern Energy. Now, I'm not talking co-op country. Your investor-owned utilities like Northwestern Energy are seeing more dramatic increases in their electricity rates than co-ops. But for most of the people in this state, they are served their electricity by Northwestern Energy. And since you can see about 2009, 2010, the green line there is how much energy your average residential customer uses. So you can see that's remained pretty darn flat. But what has increased by 87% since 2009 is our rates. Our electricity rates from Northwestern Energy have increased 87% since July of 2009. That's a lot. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we're not going to go into a lot of detail on that, but I'd love to talk to you about that afterwards. But I'm just laying out the framework, the base from where we're working from. The next slide, please. The next one is how much money are we actually paying? We have seen in customer rates, we have seen a 39.4% increase in electricity rates for Northwestern Energy customers since 2022. 40% in just a few years. I don't know about you, but my paycheck hasn't increased that much. So we have to ask what is going on and what could make this even worse. So in the most recent rate case, we've seen rates rise around 12%. So we need to get a handle on this, right? This is not something that is sustainable. We absolutely cannot continue to afford to see electricity bills increase at this rate. That's not okay. So what's been happening in the data center world nationally? Next slide. Oh, wait, let me go to this slide first. So the top is Northwestern's existing customer base. That's how much energy we need now for Northwestern's customer base. That is annual. That's average megawatts, okay? So that's about annual. So what the bottom line is the data centers that have been proposed in Montana. And I want you to compare how much energy is needed to serve existing customers in Northwestern service territory versus how much money or how much energy data centers are demanding. It is a tremendous increase in the energy demand on Northwestern Energy system. If Northwestern does serve all of those data centers, we are going to have to triple the amount of electricity that is produced in this state. Triple. And considering it cost about $250 million at a 9.65% return on equity for us to build 175 to serve all of that, if existing customers are all on the hook for doing this. We want to make sure that existing customers do not pay for that increase in energy demand, whether that's the power plants, whether that's a transmission and distribution system, anything. We shouldn't have to pay. That is tremendous. So this is what's been happening. About a year ago, Harvard came out with a study, and the study talked about what has been happening across the country with subsidization of data centers by existing customers. That Harvard study had all sorts of examples. It had all sorts of questions people should be asking. We turned around and asked the Public Service Commission after this, and we asked the legislature to do something about this. Really simple tasks, like, hey, legislature, could you just require these data centers to say how much energy they need each year? The legislature rejected that bipartisan bill. Then we went to the Public Service Commission. We said, what's going on with these data centers? PSCs did the right thing. They sent a letter to Northwestern Energy, and they said, hey, you've got to come to us for approval to serve power to these data centers. And Northwestern sent them a response that was basically like, no, we don't. So it took until August of this year for the PSC to again say, hey, Northwestern, what is going on? You need to talk to us about serving data centers because we have to approve it. Northwestern initially said, nah, you don't. We read the law differently. Even Talon Energy intervened and said, wait, or intervened is the wrong word, but they submitted a letter that said, yes, Northwestern does need Public Service Commission approval. So what happened was, Northwestern finally said later in the fall, okay, we'll come to you. We will have a proposal on your desk by the end of the year. We are still waiting. We still do not have a proposal from Northwestern Energy that's going to guarantee that we do not subsidize data centers. We're waiting for that. The PSC needs to insist on it. Because what is happening across this country right now, this study just came out of Yale, and it was published in the Washington Post in the last week or so. And it shows that until about 2007, the rates for different customer classes, in the electricity world, there's different customer classes. There's industrial customers, there's commercial customers, and then there's residential and small business customers. And you can see until about 2007, rates were pretty similar for all of those. We pretty much shared the burden of the electricity system. And then you start seeing in 2008 or so, a change. You start seeing that industrial prices are actually going down. You start seeing that commercial and data center prices start rising a little bit. But across this country, what we've seen is residential customers are picking up the majority share of the cost for our energy system these days. That, to me, is not okay. But that is what is happening. And that is going to get worse if we're not careful. So what we saw, PJM is an area of the northeast United States. A bunch of states basically work together on the transmission system. And what PJM's market watchdog just said recently is that 70% or $9.3 billion of increased electricity costs over the past year were caused by data center demand. This is basically an entity of utilities and states. It's not a bunch of enviros. This is the market watchdog for this area of energy distribution or transmission. It's saying 70% of the costs, increased costs, are coming from data centers. That's why we need to be careful. Next slide. This is a bipartisan issue. This is not a Democrat versus Republican issue. And I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, regardless of what side of the aisle you might be on. Because even DeSantis, governor of Florida, has come out and said, whoa, on data centers. This is a problem. He said he's taking aim at them because they're sprouting up across the country. He is siding with local communities. And we are seeing an increased number of people on both sides of the aisle do this. I can tell you last session when I was lobbying on this issue, it was bipartisan pro-data centers. I think that we're going to have a very different session next year. I do. I think that people are waking up to the demands that data centers have on the system and the fact that we need some control to protect those of us who are already here. Next slide. Retroactive laws are always very difficult to pass. It's way easier to get out in front of these problems and avoid the problems in the first place. So that's why we're here. We want to talk about this. We don't have all the answers. We have a lot of ideas. But we do know the questions that need to be asked and answered. And those answers need to be enforceable, not just a marketing scheme where somebody says, don't worry about it, we're gonna use a closed loop system. We need that in writing. So in here, Virginia is data center capital of the United States. They have so many data centers, they put us all to shame. But 92% of Virginians, 92%, say that lawmakers must do more to control data center impacts. Okay, that is pretty darn universal. And new statewide polls show voters are blaming data centers for rising electricity costs and want legislative action to protect ratepayers. We are out front. We can protect ourselves now if we act now. If we continue to twiddle our thumbs, then we are not going to protect ourselves from data centers. I believe that data centers and the public can coexist if done well, but if not done well, guess what? Guess who gets screwed? And it's not the data center. Next slide. Texas, so you have a labor leader in Texas talking about how developers are coming and it's time we did something about this. That gives Texas power to demand good jobs. They're talking about being proactive, labor being proactive and saying, this is what we want. We agree with that. We think that we should demand that these jobs be union jobs or at least pay the prevailing wage. We want to make sure, because what we're hearing is, first off, there aren't that many jobs once the data center gets built. There's actually very few in the long run. But what we do want is to make sure that these are not low-wage jobs. And that is what communities are seeing in this country. They're seeing that the jobs that are on site are low-wage jobs. So we want to make sure that the people who are working at these facilities on a day-to-day basis, living in your communities, are paid a living wage, a prevailing wage. And I think that there's some labor leaders out there in the country who are saying the same thing. Next slide. So what is the risk? So data centers, great. Let's bring them in. They're going to lower our bills. More power means it's going to lower our bills. That is not what the data is showing. Some people are misinterpreting some recent studies that are coming out of Berkeley, saying if we have a lot more demand for power, guess what? Our bills go down. That's not true in investor-owned utilities service territory. So what we're seeing is there are big risks to existing customers. First off, data centers, they're not always good neighbors. Sometimes they are. Let's hope that the one that's going to be here is going to be. They're saying the right things. By and large, we're still waiting for a lot of answers, though. You had Elon Musk, his AI data center outside of Memphis. It built 36 gas turbines to power that facility without an air permit. How would you feel if you lived next door? The people who lived in that neighborhood got mad, they sued, and Elon Musk got air permits for half of his gas turbines in 1 month. How much time does that give you to actually look at the air pollution impacts from a whole lot of diesel generators? If Quantica is going to be building a 1,000 megawatt facility and the grid system is stressed during times of really cold weather or really hot weather, the grid system gets stressed in Montana, and that means peak demand is it is hard to meet. That means these data centers fire up their diesel generators. So what are the air pollution emissions of 1,000 megawatts of diesel generators? Those are questions that we should have answers to. Next slide. So we wanted to compare two businesses in Butte. One of them is a cryptocurrency operation, which under Montana law is a data center. And the other is REC Silicon, which is a manufacturer in the Butte area. And so we compared their taxes. And you look and you can see in the red, the local taxes paid by Atlas Power, which is a data center, are much lower. Local taxes for years have been lower. State taxes have been lower. Employees way lower. And look at the energy use. So that's the difference between most of your manufacturing, your companies that, we have lots of jobs in those companies, versus a data center. This is one of the reasons that the Butte Silver Bow commissioners just passed unanimously last week and they agreed to send a letter to the Montana Public Service Commission saying, you need to protect existing customers. They're worried about their industrial facilities having to pay more for electricity and maybe going someplace else. REC Silicon has already closed up shop on part of its manufacturing plant in Butte because of electricity prices. That was what they said in the newspaper. It was high cost of electricity. And the Butte Silverbow commissioners didn't want that to happen to their other big industrial facilities in that area. So Butte Silverbow asked the Public Service Commission to do its job and protect existing customers. Next slide. So what happens if this is a bubble? As a lot of people like the Wall Street Journal are wondering. So what does that mean? If these guys, AI solves their problem, it does things a lot faster, and they don't need all this data center space that they're proposing. First off, these guys are shopping around. A lot of these data centers, maybe not Quantica, but a lot of the data centers that are proposed in Montana are shopping around in states trying to find the best deal. It is a race to the bottom. States are lowering their property tax rate. Remember, in Montana, since 2017, data centers property tax rate 0.9%. 0.9% for all their infrastructure. Your property tax as a homeowner was higher than that until this last session. That is not okay. These guys should be paying their way. So what happens if they go away? What happens if a data center, like the crypto operation down at the Hardin Generating Station, it's only been a crypto operation for, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years. They've already had 2 different crypto operations in there. So what happens if they go away? We've already built, as Northwestern Energy customers, we have built transmission lines and distribution lines and power plants. That's the one I'm really worried about, power plants. If we get stuck paying the bill for a power plant and the data center that needed it disappears, we still get to pay the bill for that power plant, even if they're not still here. We need rules in place to protect us from that happening. Other states are doing this. We are not asking for anything outlandish. These are the same requests that other states are doing right now. So what's happened in China? China had the same craze that we are experiencing now, and they have a whole lot of data centers sitting empty. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen here, that these are good companies with good jobs, doing the right thing, that are not stealing our water and are not raising our electricity rates. We can do this. If you look at IBM, head of IBM said in early December, there is no way this data center craze is going to come to fruition the way they're saying. There simply are not enough chips. Go look that up. Go look up NVIDIA chips. There aren't enough chips to power this AI revolution that these guys are talking about. The numbers that they're saying of data centers that they need by 2030, it's not possible based upon chip manufacturing. So something is fishy. And we want answers before we start investing money to bring these people into this state. Next slide, please. We want transparency. Does this look, who raise your hand? Who thinks this looks like it's transparent? These are the agreements that Northwestern Energy just submitted to the Public Service Commission, notices of intent with the data centers. Quantica's up there. Quantica's up there. The ones on the upper left-hand side, those are Quantica. We don't know what agreements there are with data centers. As the Harvard study showed us, some of these data centers are cutting sweetheart deals with utilities, and we don't know it. That's not fair. We should know what our utility is selling power for to a data center, just like we should know what they're selling their power for to us. We're paying the bills. So we want transparency. That's not it. But that's what we have right now. So we have more questions than we have answers. Next slide. I get a lot of questions. We've done these in a few communities and had overwhelming attendance. It's really great to have people so curious about what's going on. And every time we get questions about nuclear power. What about these new small modular reactors? Well, first, they don't exist. They're still in the developing stage. They don't exist. They're incredibly expensive. The federal government is pouring billions and billions of dollars into trying to make these things work. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. What we do know is we already have, large nuclear reactors in the last 15 years. We've only added 2 gigawatts. It takes a really long time to build a nuclear reactor because, first off, you have to consider safety issues. But in the last year, we've added 34 gigawatts of solar, 5.5 gigawatts of wind, and 13 gigawatts of battery storage. So if we're going to invest in new energy, let's go with the ones that are already working, the ones we already know how to do, the ones that don't cost as much money. Federal government, I can't tell you how many In the last year and a half, the federal government, both Congress, executive orders, Department of Energy, and NRC have been weakening their obligations when it comes to nuclear energy oversight. That makes me nervous. It should make all of us nervous. This is something we should take seriously because you know what happens? They store nuclear waste on site. There is no other place to put it. So raise your hand here if you want radioactive material from a nuclear facility stored in Broadview. I mean, that is what happens. So let's be clear that don't think that that waste is going to go someplace else if we do build a nuclear facility. And then who pays for it? Because nuclear energy is way more expensive than the alternatives. Next slide. So what has the legislature done? I've already talked a little bit about that. We're going to have questions. Pardon? But Mary, would you go backwards? Where will the water come from? Right. So maybe an SMR doesn't need water. Maybe it does. But we need to know these answers to these questions because I heard a rumor that someday this facility might go nuclear. They're talking the right talk. They're talking about renewables right now and storage. That sounds good. Are they obligated to do that? No. Northwestern Energy is talking about replacing Colstrip with nuclear. You know why? Because it makes more money when it spends more of our money. But where will the water come from and where will the radioactive material be stored? Those are questions we should be asking if anybody says, what about nuclear? First off, it doesn't exist in the SMRs, the small modular reactors. Next slide. So what has the legislature done? 2017, they passed a bill. The data centers and all their communications equipment get a property tax rate of 0.9%. I sure would have liked that back in 2017 and 2018 and 2019. And then in 2023, they made crypto and data centers basically the same thing. Crypto are much smaller operations by and large. And then in 2025, they expanded the tax rate. There were 3 other bills. A couple were bad. One was allowing Northwestern to bypass the Public Service Commission to serve data centers. We fought that hard, and we won. The legislature did the right thing, and they killed that bill. It flew through the House, but it died in the Senate, thankfully. Then, electricity reporting requirements, something I already said. They killed that in committee. Why? Let's just know how much energy these guys are using on the system. It would allow the Public Service Commission to better plan for our energy system. Legislature said no. And then there was a study resolution. Let's study these things. Let's find, let's get the answers to the questions that we have. They killed that bill. Next slide. So what's been done so far? MEIC and a whole lot of other organizations, we petitioned the Public Service Commission back in November, and we asked them to actually set rates for these guys. We asked them to make their own rate class, and so the data centers, we could attribute all of their costs to them. And this is something Quantica has been right on. Quantica says they support a rate class, a separate rate class for data centers. However, I haven't seen Quantica do that publicly. I haven't seen them before the Public Service Commission or the legislature or the Governor's Energy Task Force talks about that. So we need them to be loud about wanting that to happen because that is a critical component of protecting existing customers is getting the Public Service Commission to have a separate rate class for data centers. So we are not subsidizing those data centers. So we asked for that. We asked for some tariffs. Tariffs being these guys leave after 5 years, they have to pay some exit fees. If we built them a power plant, guess what? They should have to help us pay for that power plant. We shouldn't be stuck paying the cost. Those are called tariffs. We want tariffs too, to protect existing customers. Northwestern said it was going to come in with just asking for tariffs, but we're still waiting. Next slide. So water. And John is going to talk about water in a lot more detail in this area, but I'm just going to give you a quick overview, and I'm sorry it's taking so long, I'll be fast. But generally, we don't know much about water because data centers don't have to report it. We would like data centers to say how much water they're going to use. Quantica, we've been hearing they're going to use a closed loop system. What does that mean? What we've been learning is closed loop system does not mean that they don't use water. Closed loop system means they do recirculate that water, but there's heat in that water and they need to exchange that heat so they can use that water again to use in the cooling system. And we need to know what they're losing in that second part of a closed loop system. We need to know how much water they need because these data centers have the potential to need 10 million gallons of water a day. Okay? That's what we do. So let's make sure it's a closed loop system, but let's know more about that closed loop system, how much water is lost and what happens. So this graphic up here shows the data center uses water for cooling. It's more efficient to cool with water than it is with air. So they use water for cooling. They use water for generation. So to build a power plant out here, it's going to need water, most likely. You need power for water treatment. So these guys, they need really clean water. They can't just use water they're pulling out of the ground that might have a lot of salts or arsenic or other things in it. They need pure water. So they have to treat that water before they can use it. That means there's a wastewater discharge. What's in that wastewater? Where is that wastewater going? Is it going under the ground? Is that a lined pond? Is it going into the groundwater? Or is it going into the municipal wastewater system? And if so, is your system prepared to handle the volume? Is your system prepared to handle the pollutants? Because when these guys use this, they use things like surfactants and biocides. They inject things into the stream to make sure that that water moves through their system well. What are those things? What do they contain? Where are they going to go? So we have questions. We just have questions. Next. So they must use the best available technology, both for consumption and for contamination. We need transparency. So what we have here is in the back of the room, you're going to find this sheet. It's the questions we have. All the questions we think we need answered. And we don't want these questions answered by somebody who is a salesman. We want these questions answered by the company, and we want to be able to hold them accountable to their answers. We want to know what they're planning to do with the water, and with the electricity, and with the noise, and with the lighting. These things have disturbed communities across this country with noise and lighting. That seems really simple unless you're the person who lives nearby. So let's get these questions answered. That's all. And then we need some regulations. We need some things to make sure that they are coming here on our terms and they are not interfering with senior water right holders, that they're not taking water that they don't have a right to, that they have sufficient water discharge facilities. We have the ability, and that they're not harming existing electricity customers. We have the ability to put these safeguards in place at the various levels of government. We need to do that. I will end there, I think. Next. And then the question always is, who pays? So this is just, you don't have to read it. It's on this piece of paper. These are the questions that need answering. I hope you look at those. I hope you ask your elected officials those questions. And I hope you ask Quantica or any other data centers might come this way. Because in order to protect yourselves, in order to protect the resources in this area, you need answers to these questions. Thanks, Dan. Next, we have John Reiten to talk a little bit about impacts to water. And John is a hydrologist. John is a retired emeritus research hydrologist with the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, where he spent 38 years conducting applied groundwater research. He holds both a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Geology from the University of North Dakota. John's research in Montana has focused on full hydrology, groundwater resource exploration and management, and the impacts of oil field contamination on groundwater resources. Much of his career has been devoted to identifying and characterizing groundwater resources in the glaciated terrains of northeastern Montana, including exploration to define aquifer boundaries and the establishment of monitoring networks to support sustainable resource management. In addition to his work in northeastern Montana, John has also conducted groundwater resource evaluations in south central Montana, including areas near Billings, Red Lodge, and Broadview.
Well, thank you. Anyway, my work in the Broadview area was like 17, 18 years ago. I keep looking at the crowd to see if there's anyone I recognize. So far, I haven't. But I'm sure there are some people still around. But what I was doing is I was looking for a potential public water supply for the town of Broadview. And this region around Broadview this is just kind of an aerial view of some of the features. Unfortunately, I put the Broadview pond in the wrong place, but it's closer to. One thing that after reviewing a report from 17 years ago, the errors really stand out, and I found a lot of typos. So anyway, it's just kind of interesting. But anyway, the main feature in this area is the Comanche Basin, which is Broadview sits at the northwest corner of that basin. So all the drainage in the immediate area around Comanche Basin flows into the basin. It doesn't go anywhere else. The surface water doesn't drain to the Yellowstone or Muscle Shell or anything like that. And that just west of Broadview, there's a divide between the Comanche Basin and the Painted Road Creek, which goes up to the Muscle Shell. Other places of interest of importance is the Hailstone Basin to the southwest and the Lake Basin, which is just south of there. Those are also internally drained basins that everything in the immediate area drains into, so there's no outlet. So that's something to think about as far as if they have to release water to potential contamination, because it's in one way it's not going anywhere. Sorry, one way it's not going anywhere, but the other thing is that it can build up in concentration. So that's just kind of the overview of the general area, showing some of the major streams and stuff in the area. Next slide. As part of that project, we looked at various radiuses away from Broadview, 3 miles, 6 mile, 9 mile radiuses, which are those circles. And some of the things, looked at the geology. The geology is very critical for the water resources in this area. Basically, to the west of Broadview, there's Cretaceous deposits of, there's several formations, the Eagle, the Claggett, and a couple other ones, but they're the main potential, and the Judith River. The Eagle and the Judith River are possible water sources. And as you go to and so a lot of those formations are right at the surface. You go east of Broadview, you're getting into what's called the Bull Mountain Basin. And so the depth to those formations rapidly drops off, just not too far from Broadview. It's over 1,000 feet to the Eagle. Well, it's several thousand feet. Right at Broadview, the depth to the city water wells are about 1,000 feet. It's several thousand feet when you go to the east. And then to the west of Broadview, they're right at the surface. You can put in a less than 100-foot well and get decent water. Anyway, another feature on this map, geologic map, there's a couple of different things that are important. There's the Broadview Dome, which is south of town, and the Lake Basin fault zones. All those black lines are traces of faults that have been mapped by geologists. And there's a Lake Basin fault zone which extends from past Rappeljay all the way down to past Huntley, which is an old fault system. And apparently it's the reason why we have all these closed basins up here. It's the way the ground was shifted and moved and left these basins behind. Next slide. Anyway, these are the aquifers or formations that likely contain water. I've got poor, fair, and good listed here. In the basically from the Fox Hills above the Bear Paw Shale, the Fox Hills, Elk Creek, And the Tulloch and the Tum River member are fair aquifers. You can get 5 gallons a minute, most of the time, maybe up to 10, 15, and possibly a little more, but it's moderately good water. It's not the best in the world. Down a little bit deeper in the section is the Judith River aquifer, which is a pretty decent aquifer in places, but it's very, it varies a lot from one place to another. In the one place where usually it's pretty poor, but there is a place right at the intersection of Buffalo Trail and Moult Road. There's at least 2, maybe 3 wells that do about 100 gallons a minute of really good water. Why? I don't know, but it's one place that I've seen good water through this river. The Eagle aquifer is predominantly the best aquifer in the area. In town here, it's at about 1,000 feet. Out past Gooseneck Creek to the west, 6-7 miles away, it's right at the surface. You drive around, you see these little hoodoos and stuff like that, little sandstone pillars. That's the Eagle. You know you're in the Eagle. And by the way, it's the same rocks that are the rims in Billings and the rims around Hailstone Basin are Eagle. So the Eagle in west of here towards Hailstone Basin has pretty fair water, moderately good quality, and fair yields. The place that, anyway, I think that covers that. I'll talk about some of the deeper things a little bit later, deeper zones. Let's see, next slide. Anyway, here's some statistics and information on wells in the 9 townships surrounding Broadview. As you can see, most of the wells are, the yields are fairly low, under 30 gallons a minute. The yields are on the bottom axis, and the number of wells are there. So, most of them are under, just 10, 15, 20, up to 30 gallons a minute. There really isn't that many high yielding wells in the whole area. So they're talking about if they really do need 1 million gallons a day, you're not going to get that with these. 1 million gallons a day is probably, I think it's right around 800 gallons a minute. So it's like what you need for a quarter pivot irrigation well. So anyway, let's go to the next slide. Sorry, is that it? Okay. I thought there was one more. Go back one. I think I'm going to speed up. That's the depths. That's a little different than the last one. So most of the wells are under 200-300 feet deep. You get some deeper ones like the town wells, but most people don't have the money to drill those. They're very expensive. So most of the wells are relatively shallow, and it's enough to supply your house or your stock. Typically, that's what these wells are designed for in most cases. Now we can go to the next one. Sorry. Anyway, this is a range of comparison of the water quality with some of the different formations that typically would have wells in them, or typically aquifers that would supply water to wells. Again, most of the water is in the poor to very poor range. You start getting in the Judith and the Eagle, it gets a little bit better. The good water is just on the far outreaches of the range of the Eagle, and that's Eagle Formation, and that's not a very big area, but typically for I know when I was looking at the water supply for the potential water supply for town, we set a limit of basically, a specific conductance, that's that SC number, that kind of measures the salt content of the water, the dissolved minerals in the water. So that was at about, less than 1,000 is what would be ideal for most people, so, for most water supplies. Unfortunately, the town is nowhere near that, it's much saltier than that. But, I guess one thing you do have in the future, the Central Montana pipeline, hopefully bringing you some good, better water. I don't know when that's happening, but it's, I know it's projected. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. Again, these are the blue outlined areas are the areas that I thought could be, provide water supplies for town. Broadview Dome area, we did a test down at Delmer Mosdell's, and it it was a flowing well that actually flowed about, it had been reported to be over 1,000 gallons a minute, but when we got there, a test we did, it was under 400. And it produced pretty good water, it was okay, but it was really salty. It had about 5,800 was the number for conductivity, so it wasn't really good. But anyway, that's what we found in and that was an Eagle well, but it was in what I think it was in the Broadview Dome, and that's where you have all those faults going through this, so the rocks are busted up a lot. And so I'm guessing that it was hot water from much deeper formations were coming to the surface through those fractures. So that's why, and that's was pushing up the bad water. So it's just, we don't really know a lot about what's, we know a few places where there's good water, but most places it's a little difficult to guarantee you're gonna find something really good. Anyway, let's go to the next one. And kind of a summary slide. Again, most of the wells in the Broadview area, the 9 townships around here, are less than 20 gallons a minute. Most of them are relatively shallow, less than 300 gallons a minute. And as I just mentioned, the complex geology makes it difficult to predict well success. One thing that's for sure is poor water quality is very common, and the water that is commonly produced is sodium sulfate rich water, and doesn't work with vegetation, and it does produce health problems in humans and livestock. To end up here, I'm going to mention a little bit about, because I've heard mentioned that there are potential sources for a data center would be deep water, like out of the Madison Aquifer. It's probably about 3,000 to 4,000 feet to complete a well in the Madison Aquifer in this area. In contrast to over in the Bull Mountain Mine has 2 of them. And the 2 wells that they have are, one is 8,600 and one is 9,200 feet deep. And I've heard rumors, or I'm not sure rumors, but I've talked to consultants that have mentioned that they're looking at drilling a new one at the mine because it keeps plugging up because of all the minerals in the water, or corrosion problems with the wells. So they're probably not very long life. So anyway, and another thing of interest is that in the Bull Mountain mines, those 2 Madison wells, the temperature is about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. The temperature, I talked to a geologist that's doing geothermal work, and we tried to come up with an estimate of what it would be in the Broadview area, and it looks like it's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's warm water. I don't know how you cool with that, but places that use it have to put it into ponds to cool. So anyway.
Thank you. John. Thank you for coming tonight. And we have a lot of questions, and we feel like we need answers from our elected officials and from people that can help regulate these data centers. And so we put a couple avenues for you to engage here. We put the city council and mayor of Broadview, their contact information for the city council and the mayor, the Yellowstone County Commission, the contact information there, and also the governor's energy task force, some of the senators and representatives in the area with the Montana legislature. And I know that we don't have everybody on here, but if you want to know who your legislator is, there's a great resource on the Montana legislative website where you can search by your address and you can figure out who your legislator is. And also the Montana Public Service Commission. As Ann mentioned, there are efforts to make sure that data centers are in their own rate class so that they aren't impacting residential customer rates. And so if you support that, please let your public service commissioners know. And Ann, is there anything you want to add with contacting elected officials?
No, you just listed those two, just because they're the ones in this area. There are 5 public service commissioners. I would like to thank the elected officials who came here tonight. I mean, I appreciate the fact that there are elected officials in the audience who are learning. I think that that's really important. We're all learning together, but they are the ones who have the ability to actually do something to protect us. So, thanks to those guys.
And with that, I guess we'll get,
Well, there is a sheet in the back of the room. You don't have to quickly take notes here. There's a sheet that says all of those names and contact information. Take one of them and just have a conversation with your elected official. They represent you.